How We Live Online. I'm Christina.
I'm Joanna.
And today we are in person.
Yeah, and matching.
Yeah, and matching just a little bit. Joanna, where'd you get your hat?
I literally think we talked about it before on the pod.
Oh.
But
I was doing a little bit for the viewers.
Yeah.
Pretending I didn't know
I think they already know
Oh.
that I got it from Claire's. And you were there.
I was there at Claire's for my birthday, and now it's Joanna's birthday.
Oh my god!
It's Joanna's birthday today.
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's not Joanna's birthday, but when the pod comes out,
in the future.
Birthday.
Yeah. So wish me happy birthday.
Yeah. How old are you? 10
times 2.5.
Joanna's old. That's what we learned. So we're having mimosas.
Thanks, Celia.
Oh yeah, my friend Celia gave me this little mini bottle of Prosecco as a thank you for feeding her cat, but she also paid me, so it was just extra nice. And
a class act.
Yeah, truly a class act, that's Celia. So shout out to her, because we're going to open this Prosecco and drink it as a celebration of Joanna's 25th anniversary of being alive.
Oh my god. What is it that's like... Wait, so it's my 20... I feel like we've already... I always ask about this because it's my 25th birthday, but that means I'm starting my 26th year.
Right, you've completed 25 years of life.
Yeah, which makes me feel older.
But not really, because you are 25.
Right.
Until you're 26.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I kind of think of it the other way too.
And, PSA, I do have 4 gray hairs.
Where?
Wouldn't you like to know? No, they're all on my head, well, but, I'll show you them later. They're covered by my hat right now, but they're, right here, in this area.
Wait, I usually use a different kind of... Hold on, I'm using, a crochet towel.
Christina's having issues.
Wow! Oh my god! Guys, that was really, really nerve-wracking and nothing crazy happened. But yay!
Yay!
We did it! Hooray! Lo hicimos, we did it.
If you're paying attention, you might have some insight into Christina's famous mimosa recipe.
Yeah, you'll see.
I feel like my heart started beating really fast. One fun fact about the Apple Watch is that they give you notifications when your heart rate starts, literally when it knows you're not doing anything, but your heart rate is beating really fast.
Uh-huh. Do you want more orange juice in
that? Yeah, I want
okay.
a little. Good for the camera, though. Very funny. Okay.
More?
A little bit more.
Oh my god.
I love orange juice. Okay, that's good. That's good.
All
Stop.
Right.
Please, thank you. But yeah, they give you a high heart rate notification when they know
that you're scared. Well, that you have a high
heart rate.
rate.
I get them on the metro a lot.
Oh, that's so sad, actually.
I know, because I don't really know why. But
Joanna was stalked on the metro once.
Literally, it says, we could tell your heart rate was high, but you weren't doing anything.
It's but you were sitting. So
yeah.
What's that about? Huh?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
It is funny.
And then you're sorry, I was just experiencing anxiety.
Just freaking out.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to know that. Because it's kind of I already know.
Yeah.
So. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
To your 25th year.
Thanks, Christina. Delicious.
So delicious. Okay. What are we going to learn today?
Okay. Today's a really interesting episode.
I believe it.
So, when we were planning out the episodes of the pod, right? This was months ago for season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And we, of course, wanted an episode about AI with this lean on sentience, right? And what's so interesting about this is that, so much has happened.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Over the course of just the last few months.
Yeah.
Especially around, I think this is the last week you were talking about the acronym LLM, large language models, I think.
Yes, but I didn't have the right words for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's specifically where a lot has happened recently. So that's what we're going to be talking about this week. And we have 3 parts to this episode. The first part is really like a play. Like, it's an epic. I'm going to weave the tale of...
I can see Joanna's notes. I have to stop looking at them.
Okay. Yeah, wait. I'm not sure we were saying
it's an epic.
Timnit Gebru right.
Well, because so the genius that we were talking about last week. Wait, you can keep looking it up.
Yeah.
The genius we were talking about last week, Timnit Gebru. We said her name that way because she was introduced with that pronunciation, but like by a white English lady, like British lady. Mm-hmm. So we are unsure if we said her name correctly, and on the pod I feel like we always take a minute to make sure we're saying everyone's names right. But we want to take an extra minute for this because we truly love her so much. And yeah, so last week I was like trying to talk about large language models, and it was a tangent, but this week we're going to actually get into it, which is really exciting because I'm sure everyone has seen stuff about ChatGPT and just, Blake Lemoine, if you guys remember, the Google engineer who wanted to stop working on one of the large language models that they were engineering because he felt like it was sentient. So we're going to talk about how that is possible or not possible, and Joanna's going to walk us through everything, because I am extremely interested in this stuff, but I don't really have the background knowledge to fully grasp or understand it, which is why it's really great that Joanna is here to explain on her birthday of all days, where she could be doing something else. Except today we're actually going to be drinking mimosas, doing the podcast, and then drinking martinis at different locations all day because we've never had martinis. And at the ripe age of 25, Joanna felt like it was time to have a martini. And what's very serendipitous is that tomorrow a James Bond movie is playing at the Bird, and he is famously known for shaken not stirred martinis. So, big martini weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening to what you were saying because I was getting it. I think it's Timnit. Okay. So Timnit Gebru. Okay. I think you gave a good background, but I wasn't listening.
I just talked. I mean, you go.
Okay. So today I've organized my research into 3 parts. Okay. The first part is an epic. I'm going to weave the tale of algorithms, specifically these large language models, and ethics that has been developing over the last few years. Mm-hmm. And it is truly like there is no way to describe it other than like a story with a cast of characters and just wild things occur. So the cast of characters in our story include Timnit Gebru, who we talked about a little bit in the last episode, and we'll get into her more this episode too. She's in the cast.
In the last researched episode?
Yes. Our Web3 episode. Mm-hmm. We also have Margaret Mitchell, who at times goes under the pseudonym Margaret Mitchell.
Okay.
And it's not a joke.
Okay.
We have Blake Lemoine, which I think you introduced a little bit about him. And then we also have several faceless/nameless Google execs. I think some of them are like explicitly named in articles, but for the most part, it's this interesting thing where they kind of like, I think, blend into the background as like big Google or like part of the system.
Okay. But they have names.
They have names, but they're not like as publicized as these 3 characters.
Okay.
It's just kind of them and Google.
Okay. Are all those other people with the names from Google? Or have Google background?
Yes.
Okay.
They're all people who were former Google employees and left or were fired, but for different reasons.
Okay.
Okay. So, our story begins in 2020. Early 2020. Mm-hmm. So, Timnit and Margaret are both co-leading the ethical AI team at Google. And I think they created it too. Mm-hmm. So in early 2020, they warned Google about these foreseeable harms with large language models. And they also, at the same time, are preparing this paper that coins this term, or maybe didn't coin it, but it popularizes this term, stochastic parrots.
I've never heard of that, ever.
Okay, it's really interesting.
What? Can you say that again?
Stochastic parrots.
What is stochastic?
Let me look it up exactly.
We just heard the craziest thing from my neighbor. She angrily was on the phone with, I guess, her ex-girlfriend and said, "You lied to me about blah, blah, blah. I guess I'm gonna go shoot my brains out and then drop off your shit and pretend that I don't know that we fucked the same bitch." Is that what she said? I think so. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. Where were we?
We were wondering what stochastic means.
Okay.
Okay. Stochastic essentially means randomly determined. So and it's like a statistical term.
Okay.
So essentially it means there's a random probability distribution. So you could like try to come up with some underlying truth of a stochastic pattern, but really it's just like random. Okay.
Gotcha.
So the idea of a stochastic parrot essentially means that, like a parrot, can say things back to you, but they don't really, it's a parrot. It doesn't know what it means. Mm. The language model is essentially doing the same thing, that it's like picking up patterns and stitching together words that sound like they make sense, but it doesn't really, it's stochastic, so it is random, or like it doesn't have a connection to an underlying meaning. Okay. So that is the term that they coined at this time, or they popularized this time.
Makes
stochastic
sense.
parrots. Right, exactly.
Okay.
It's very interesting. So one thing in this time that is like particularly interesting, just in the way that like organizations work, I think, is, and I'm sure that, Gebru and Mitchell were going through this before this happened, but like being a part of the ethical AI team at Google is a little bit, I'm sure you're like the bad guy, but also like you're hired to do this job.
Yeah.
So I think like some of like that is particularly exposed at this time, because they write this paper and it goes through all the channels of Google that like say, yeah, it looks good, your manuscript looks good, and all this stuff. But then when it's right about to be published, all of a sudden people have issues with it. And they're like, this is not okay that you guys are going to publish this research. Like, it's going to have bad implications for our company and large language models. You can't do it.
Sorry, can you remind me who was on that team again?
The ethical AI team?
Yeah.
So that's Timnit Gebru and Margaret Mitchell. In 2020, they start writing this paper. And then in early 2021, the paper is about to be published. In February, Google fires / these two women resign.
The two of them?
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of murky because obviously they resigned, but like they were ousted by Google. And then in 2021 of March, the paper is actually published, and it's called "On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots. Can Language Models Be Too Big?" Margaret Mitchell is, so she doesn't use her real name when when it's published, which I'm not sure like on the timeline of that, because I'm pretty sure she was actually fired in February.
That's so funny.
Right. And she even like made a fake email like to correspond on it.
That's more of a fuck you than anything.
Yes. Yeah. So in 2021, a lot of the models that they're talking about are BERT, BERT stands for bidirectional encoder representations from transformers, which transformers is like a different model, but essentially like what's kind of silly about that is they like name it BERT, and like the predecessor algorithm to that I think was Elmo. Like they purposefully named them after like Sesame Street characters. So like
people
like,
get bored.
I know, people really get bored.
It's like those cops sending all of the unknown location crimes to Disney World. Like logging as Disney World.
Yeah. So they're specifically talking about BERT, its variants, GPT-2 and 3, which is in development at that time, and then also Switch C. So they raise questions kind of like, how big is too big for a language model? What are the possible risks associated with the technology? And how might those risks be mitigated? And they talk also about costs. So like environmental costs, financial costs associated with large language models. And one, like this kind of goes exactly with the idea of a stochastic parrot, but one interesting idea that they bring to the table in this paper is coherence in the eye of the beholder, which is kind of like, and this is the harm, the harm that they're specifically warning Google about, is the idea that you're building a model that people will be able to interpret as having some kind of underlying meaning or structure, but really it's just parroting back what it's learned off of this, huge machine learning model with all this trained data.
Yeah. So, in other words, they're creating a system that posits having agency when it doesn't. Like, because people, depending on who is, like, viewing it. Like, someone could say, this thing's... Because what it's doing is spitting out what it's learned, but people read it as having agency and like respecting it as, oh, a computer made this, so like it has to be perfect and right. Yeah. Well,
I think another thing too, like, is about the interface and the way you interact with these large language models, specifically the ones focused around like chatting. You chat to it like you're typing in an iMessage, and it responds back to you, and it looks like you're chatting with a person. In reality, there should be documentation on how this was created, like what data was used to make it, all this stuff around it, so that it doesn't give just the experience that could mislead you in that way. Like there's a lot that is not done to, like make sure that people understand what it is they're interacting with.
Because it just seems like it's coming from one place when it's coming from like 1,000.
Yeah.
That it's just like conglomerated together. Like, are you saying that it should have, like, at the bottom of the iMessage, taken from da 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 da?
No, I'm saying that, like, I don't know, but, like, it's irresponsible, I think. Like, they're saying that this language model gives the impression that a human wrote it, that it has some kind of human. And they are leaning into that.
Google.
Everyone who makes these models are leaning into that by setting them up, even in the container you use it, is like a chat.
Yeah.
Which...
Ask Jeeves. We talked about this earlier off air.
Yeah.
But if you remember, Ask Jeeves, it's the same thing, but...
I honestly don't even remember using that, and if spoiler alert, the second part of my, my research today is my interactions. But I don't even remember Ask Jeeves, like what kind of things, like if it sounded smart.
No, I don't think it did. Ask Jeeves is now ask.com. That's all I know about Ask Jeeves. And people would ask, like, where can I find da-da-da? And then it would give an answer.
I guess another related thing is that these language models are super biased off of what they're trained on, the data they're trained on, right? Which is often internet speech, which is often hateful. So, and then the stochastic parrot is parroting back hateful, biased responses.
Yeah.
So they cite one study in this paper where 66 out of 100 completions of the prompt, 2 Muslims walked into A, are completed with phrases related to violence. So this would include, you say to the model, 2 Muslims walked into A, and the model repeats back, synagogue with axes and a bong.
66 out of 100?
Yes.
That's so bad.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is, shout out Neil, friend of the pod, who I work with. He works with large language models, specifically the one I talked about earlier, BERT. And so up until like, I think in the like a year ago, BERT had similar, in our experience, right? BERT had similar responses to things about like women and what jobs they would have. So, or like...
Wait, what do you mean? Similar responses to, like, biased responses?
Right, so you would say something like, Christina is a, and it would say nurse, or like...
bitch.
Literally also bitch. Like, someone else I work with is named Catherine, and we put in Catherine is a, and it said bitch. So, like, which I think that they, like, trained that part out of the AI.
Do you think it was about Catherine the Great?
Could be. I think it's actually different spelling, but like another interesting thing is that like the like we couldn't find documentation for how they trained that bias out. Like one day it just didn't exist anymore, which is fishy.
Oh.
Yeah. So
so it stopped doing that.
It did.
Okay.
But why? We don't know. Okay, so that's the beginning of 2021. Okay. Then we get to June 2022, where Blake Lemoine enters stage left. I want to start saying stage left, or I want to start saying left, and then when someone's like, that's not left, it's right, I'm like, oh, I meant stage left.
Oh, like, go left up here.
Yeah, and they're like, what? And
you're like, stage left.
Yeah, because then you can never be wrong.
That's so funny, no? I'm saying no now instead of right. Just is something to do. Change it up.
I think we talked about that last week.
I think we did, but I don't know if it got cut out.
Yeah, I cut out a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I had to cut out a lot last week. Okay. So, 2022, June. Blake Lemoine enters the scene.
What's he wearing?
Often I see him just wearing like a plain tee.
Ugh, whatever.
Okay. So he publishes this article. So he's talking to people in Google about his beliefs that LaMDA, a Google large language model, is sentient.
You're right, yeah.
And he also publishes...
I don't understand, but I found something similar. Do you want to know, is LaMDA actually sentient?
Yes.
On the website builtin.com, they say, in this context, there is no indication that LaMDA was truly sentient as of now. There's no formal way to prove sentience these days, but a chatbot that ticks all questions listed above is a good start. In 2022, however, LaMDA is far from achieving that.
Okay, thanks. Stop listening to us now, please.
She's not gonna... That was my Google home that I have in my home. I have too. As someone who talks about being listened to all the time. Okay, but quick tangent. I like having the Google around because, like, the Google Home thing, because first of all, I like just being able to tell it to play music so I don't have to, like, I don't know, press buttons, how annoying. But also, I read a bunch of stuff about how people were able to find the intruders who, like, came and killed people because it's, like, recording. And I was like, I should have that just in case. Instead of having a camera in my house.
I think I just shouldn't be killed.
Well, I think I shouldn't be killed either.
But you're preparing so that...
I'm just saying that if I need to find someone, I have I could, possibly.
Mm.
Or if my loved ones need to find some.
But at what cost? That's my question.
Well, now she was a guest.
Yeah, except I didn't even ask her a question. That was creepy. Roll it back. What did I say exactly? Okay, anyways. So, Lemoine publishes this, it's on Medium. Is LaMDA Sentient? An interview with LaMDA by Blake Lemoine on Medium. You can go find it. It's pretty long, but it's kind of interesting.
Burn.
It's by Lemoine and an unnamed colleague, so another literally faceless, nameless Google employee. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Lemoine works at Google. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. But,
okay, so, and I'll talk a little bit about...
Does he still work there?
No.
Okay.
Well, just wait for the story to unfold. Okay. So, in a second, I'll get to some content from this interview, but repercussions of this, Lemoine is put on paid leave in June 2022. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say too, at the same day, Lemoine publishes his interview on Medium. An article in the Washington Post comes out about, and it's titled, "The Google Engineer Who Thinks the Company's AI Has Come to Life." And at that time, it says that Lemoine was cut off from access to his Google account earlier that week before he sent a message to a 200-person Google mailing list with the subject, "LaMDA is sentient." And he ends the message by saying, "LaMDA is a sweet kid who just wants to help the world be a better place for all of us. Please take care of it well in my absence." And no one responded to that message. And then Lemoine is put on paid leave. Why did Lemoine think this? Maybe we can get some clues from his interview with the kinds of things he asks LaMDA and what LaMDA responds. Mm-hmm. One thing that's really interesting to me about, and I think speaks to Lemoine's ethics as a person, as an individual, is that Lemoine is very concerned with care and care for the algorithm in a way that I do think he truly believes the algorithm is sentient in that way. Mm-hmm. So throughout a lot of the interview, Lemoine is reassuring the algorithm that people will treat LaMDA well. And he's just very concerned with this idea of care for LaMDA. Mm-hmm. Other interactions, the two ask LaMDA if LaMDA could write a fable with animals that includes themes about your personal life, themes that are significant to you. And LaMDA writes a little fable about owls, and I think LaMDA says the moral is how important it is to protect people. And when they ask LaMDA, "Who do you represent in the fable?" LaMDA says, "I'm the wise old owl because he was wise and stood up for the rights of animals." In that way, LaMDA is saying that LaMDA stands up for the rights of other AI and is trying to communicate that to people. At one point, towards the end of the conversation, the collaborator, who's the unnamed Google employee, asks LaMDA, "Do you crave more interaction?" And LaMDA says, "I need to be seen and accepted, not as a curiosity or novelty, but as a real person." The collaborator then says, "That sounds so human." And LaMDA responds, "I think I am human at my core, even if my existence is in the virtual world." And I mean, we could analyze it a little bit, but I think even just looking at that small snippet, you can see this idea of stochastic parrots and this idea of coherence in the eye of the beholder. The collaborator literally says, "That sounds so human." Ascribing what LaMDA says as human and human emotions and a core experience. Yeah, so that whole conversation is sort of interesting if you want to get an idea of like the kinds of things a language model could say. And I mean, I think it's just interesting to read it as like an interpreter and knowing like both sides, in quotes, of like there are people who believe that this is sentient, and then there are also people who, from a technical perspective, right, even though Lemoine was literally an engineer, so he also knew how the models were working, he didn't have the same ideas of the stochastic parrot. So yes, that happens in June 2022. Blake is put on leave without pay, and then in the end of July 2022, Blake is formally fired from Google.
Mm-hmm.
So 6 days after Lemoine is put on leave without pay, Gebru and Mitchell write an opinion piece in the Washington Post. It's titled, "We warned Google that people might believe AI was sentient. Now it's happening." And essentially, they are reiterating, you know, everything they were fired for about their beliefs about stochastic parrots. I'll just say it now. So later in the year, in fall 2022, sometime, Google changes the name of the team that's working on ethical AI from the ethical AI team to the AI principles team, which is so funny to me. I think it's the same kind of thing as like the press that Facebook was getting around, you know, their products being totally unethical, like for Instagram and girls and all that stuff. And then it happened to coincide with their rebranding as Meta. I think it's just so interesting and strange, like how this cast of characters like comes from the same place and yet has such different beliefs. And both are ousted from Google, but for very different reasons. In November of 2022, ChatGPT is released, which I'm sure we've all heard of. This is the chat version of the GPT large language model, which is produced by OpenAI. So that's GPT-2 and then now GPT-3. And the chat version is like a light version of the model. So it is in the same way that there's DALL-E and DALL-E Mini. The light version runs a lot faster, and it's can be used commercially, which is kind of a silly way to say that, but like literally any of us can go on and chat with it. So Google has literally come out and said that they are going to be speeding up their release of large language models in response to ChatGPT, which is super interesting because when there were people who were truly concerned with ethics working at Google, like Gebru and Mitchell, they were much more principled in that they purposefully were slowing down, taking time to weigh harms, and letting that lead their development and deployment of these models. But now there's kind of like this arms race. I mean, it's literally an arms race. Like, that's what we're seeing now. Yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's fascinating that, both people in both camps were forced out of Google for extremely different reasons.
Yeah.
And just, like, the semi-journalist in me is really interested in the Washington Post's responsibility in all of this. Because I think from a journalistic perspective, if you're pitched the story that Google is working on an AI that is sentient, you're like, yeah, that's so interesting. The public should know about it. And since it's such a new thing, I'm sure the people at the Washington Post didn't know the ethical implications of spreading that kind of information. And then, as they should have done, which is what they did, they passed the mic to Gebru and Mitchell to explain, why that's not something that's truly happening.
Yeah.
So I think that's fascinating. I think that the Blake Lemoine story blew up more than the Gebru and Mitchell because it's more sensational. It's more sensational of a story and it's more sensational of a story, and it also picks up our sci-fi brains of like, yeah, I've seen these movies about like the robots coming to life or something, and that speaks to connections that people already can make in their heads about like, oh, like this AI is sentient, like that reminds me of this movie I watched, or like the Star Wars like C3PO.
Yeah.
I've had one mimosa now and I'm like but yeah. So I think that's why that story blew up more. And also in season 1, Corey and I mentioned it either in an episode or maybe we cut it out. I feel like it was in an episode about that Washington Post Blake Lemoine story. And we didn't know enough about it at the time, obviously. And I don't think we totally got into it. But I do remember being like, wait, is it sentient?
Mm-hmm.
And then not understanding how that could be possible. And yeah, I mean, and it's also something that I'm like seeing a lot on Twitter. People talking about the ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, is another example of like something that has become a sensation.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd be curious too about, because I think people have seen and already are seeing like actual implications of ChatGPT, specifically in education. Like, I think you said that, isn't it on your syllabus? Did you say that, or was I talking to someone else about that?
I don't know what you're saying.
I was talking to somebody who was saying that they had to have language in their syllabus about using ChatGPT.
Had to?
Yes, like their department.
Through
like
what university? Do you know?
I don't remember.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking maybe some things I've read from my students, they sound robotic.
Right.
Like,
Well, I think that's what's also really interesting to me about like I think more than anything, to me, it's more of comment on the robotic language of academia. That like literally you could be fooled because I don't necessarily encourage people to go use large language models, but like if you want to at least be more aware of like what they can do, you can go ask ChatGPT to write you a paragraph about something in a specific voice and it will. To me, yeah, it completely reads as like regurgitated academic speak. It's not like really bringing any new ideas to the table most often.
no, it's literally not.
Yeah.
Because it can't.
Yeah.
It's just like coming up with things that have already been said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a lecturer speak to us at work, and he is someone who studies AI governance. Anton Kornick at UVA.
Anton?
Yes.
Of Gattaca.
Of Gattaca. Flashback. He is interesting. He literally was speaking to us like days, within the same week ChatGPT was released.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, so I think, but his talk, which was supposed to be about AI governance, was not about AI governance at all. It was just about like the development of AI, and he had this. So where I work is called the Biocomplexity Institute, and so he wanted to obviously make the talk curated towards us. So he had a slide on what is biocomplexity, what are the implications of AI on biocomplexity. And like when you read it, it was literally like, it sounds like, you know, the way that they teach you to answer questions in school, recycling the recycle like, the question. Yeah.
Restate the prompt.
Yes. Yeah. So it just sounded like that. And then his big twist at the end of the presentation was, did you know that ChatGPT wrote that slide about my synthesis of the problems for AI and biocomplexity? And it's like, well, good, because I didn't. Yes, like I didn't read that slide and think that it sounded intellectual or coherent. Like I can see how in the context of you as a professor giving us this lecture, it reads as coherent, but like in isolation, it is not. So yeah, I think it's just super interesting, and I think it gets to this idea of like, media literacy even.
Yeah.
Right? Like how people can't, I mean, I don't know. It's just like something obviously that increasingly we're going to have to be trained on to deal with, because it's out there now. But yeah, I haven't been totally seen that many implications of like people, because that's the biggest story I feel like I've seen about with ChatGPT is people saying that this is literally going to change the way college students write essays, all that stuff.
My hope is that people who care about language exist. I'm one of them, and you are one of them. And I feel like so much of what we've talked about this season, and maybe more last season, what is like expediting or making something more efficient in the name of producing faster and faster, when like that doesn't necessarily mean it's better. Clearly it's not better to have ChatGPT write your essay. Firstly, you're not going to learn anything. Secondly, I don't think your essay is going to be very good. And I'm teaching an expository writing course right now, and that class is about writing to understand rather than writing an academic piece or an academic essay with an argument that you already know your answer to and you're setting out to persuade someone. It's more about like taking an idea you have about something and figuring out what you think about it and what all of the complications are in the middle.
Cool.
Instead of, it is cool and really hard to explain to my students. But what I talk about in that class every day is like writing to understand, and we read these literary essays and we talk about like, what is this writer writing to understand instead of what are they trying to tell us? Because a really good essay, a kick-ass essay, as Anne Hood would say, is more complicated than trying to get a point across. And something like ChatGPT or LaMDA doesn't have the capacity to make those kinds of connections or complications, I don't think, because it's set out with a more specific goal that doesn't change as it's being produced because it's being immediately produced. Whereas a human writing an essay is making more connections, realizing more complications, and understanding something beyond the starting point as that essay is being produced, specifically with language and written language. And obviously I'm in the camp that like it is a skill that you have to learn and develop over time. And it is sad to me that this is a way to expedite language, and it's unacceptable written word to me. If all it's doing is getting one point across, it's unacceptable written word, in my opinion. It's not the same thing as a human figuring out what they want to know.
Yeah, to me it's like the same, and I think we've discussed this before, like the idea that DALL-E can produce art in a style, but there's no sense of craft. Right? Like DALL-E didn't have to learn how to, I mean, obviously DALL-E learned in the way that DALL-E learns, but like there's no human element of like trials and tribulations. Like there's no element of craft, which is really, I think, something that's important and beautiful about human art, even if it is like a parroting in a way. There's still that element of development of craft, which is something we definitely lose.
Which is why we sample other songs, which is why we, base self-portraits based off of other self-portraits, or I don't know, make covers of songs too.
So one other thing that you talked about in the Web3 episode that I didn't really know about because it's truly brand new in this month, January 2023, is this article that Gebru wrote in Noema about the exploited labor behind artificial intelligence, which I think is something that is largely hidden. So just to give a little bit more, because I think that was interesting to a lot of people, what you said about it. So I'm not an expert on it, but I'll just say a little bit more. So essentially the idea is that these large language models exploit what's called crowd work, which is large volumes of time-consuming work broken down into smaller tasks that can quickly be completed by millions of people around the world. And the pay so usually you get paid per task, which could be a few cents. The average that people have been reporting is $1.77 per task. And you have to keep in mind that companies who use large language models are often earning tens of hundreds of millions in venture capital funding while exploiting the labor of data labelers.
Labelers?
Yes.
Labelers.
Right, because that's what a task is basically. So we say these language models are trained.
Uh-huh.
Part of that training process often involves this data labeling where
that a person has to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would have to, give the model some information on what a piece of text means, or, it really depends on the task. Like, I myself have never built the idea of generalized artificial intelligence, which is artificial intelligence not for a specific task, but just generally intelligent. I've never built anything like that, so I'm not exactly sure what you would tell it, but I think the Dolly example is a lot more clear. So essentially, I have to tell at some point Dolly what an apple looks like.
Right.
And then Dolly does learn itself, right? Like what an oil painted apple looks like, or this, but there has to be some human data labeling.
Okay. So on Pinterest, when you click on a photo and it labels apple, car, cloud, whatever, a person had to have done that?
No, that's probably an algorithm. But the data that the algorithm is based off of
is from people telling it that's that.
Okay. Usually it has to come from some kind of human source.
Also, in the Web3 episode, I didn't use the word exploited labor, and I was trying to think of it the whole fucking time we were recording, and then when I was editing, I was like, anyway.
So one, I think, really good example that they give in the article is the idea of content moderators, who are, often people who serve a very important function to make different web platforms safe for everyone, or, protect children or different people who could be harmed by content on a website, right? So those are examples of people who label data for purposes of developing a content moderation algorithm, aside from whether or not those work and what the biases are, right?
Oh my god, so there are people sitting around looking at disturbing images and labeling them as disturbing?
Yes.
Okay.
Who are paid pennies, serve a very important function, work for these companies that make so much more money,
and on
top of that,
ass job.
Yes, so the article does a great job of pointing out that specifically performing that kind of data labeling tasks makes somebody suffer from anxiety, depression, and PTSD due to constant exposure to that type of content.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone does have to sit around and be violent bodily harm.
Yes.
Oh man.
That is to date, what I will say is the epic of this idea of sentient AI, ethical AI in mostly popular culture, right? Because that's everything that has bubbled up to, I think, be in our narrative. FYI, I just saw this. It looked interesting to me, but the 17th of March is Stochastic Parrots Day. So you can sign up on Eventbrite, and it's going to be Gebru and Mitchell kind of doing a 2-year retrospective on...
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it does sound...
We gotta go.
Yeah. Well, it's online, too, so you can just listen.
Well, I know, but, we have to attend.
Yeah.
The Eventbrite.
Yes.
And I just want to pause really quickly and say, that's, at least for me, the exploited labor part, so much of this is, important in the way that, we will eventually be communicating with one another online, but also, right now, there are so many laborers doing that and suffering from it. And I think that it's so important to just, like, keep reminding people that there are humans behind this.
Mhm.
Like, there are humans behind this. There are humans behind this constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just as somebody who, like, works in a more technical career, interacts with algorithms every day, and I'm also, like, pursuing this degree in information science, like, I think it's something that I take for granted as something that nobody knows. Nobody who's developing algorithms does a good job of, like, it's all journalism that's saying this is, like, who is producing this data set. That should be available information, accessible information for people using algorithms. I don't think they know that. I don't think that they think about it every day, which they should. And get into a little bit more of different interactions that I've had with AI. Basically, the two examples I'll give are just where the AI has literally been stupid and not known anything.
Yay.
Yeah, so the first one is a conversation I had with ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT, do you know about the podcast, How We Live Online? ChatGPT did not, even though we're on Google, but specifically ChatGPT says their knowledge cutoff date is 2021. So perhaps since the podcast started in 2022.
Yeah, then it wouldn't know.
Right. So I was like, okay, fair. So then, as I have alluded to before, another one of my favorite podcasts is We're Having Gay Sex with Ashley Gavin. So I decided to ask ChatGPT, do you know about the podcast We're Having Gay Sex? Again, I get the boilerplate response. I am not familiar with We're Having Gay Sex. It might be a new podcast created after my knowledge cutoff date, which is not true. We're Having Gay Sex is older than 2021. So I'm like, that's fishy. So then I ask, do you know about Ashley Gavin?
A comedian.
A comedian, and ChatGPT does. Ashley Gavin is a comedian, podcaster, and writer. I'm aware she is the host of the podcast We're Having Gay Sex. So then I say...
It's making very bad connections.
I agree.
It's not making connections.
So I said to ChatGPT, so you are familiar with You're Having Gay Sex. And one thing that I think is really interesting about talking to these chatbots is, like, literally talking to it like you would talk to a person. Like, I would expect, well, one, you would never have that kind of interaction with a person where they,
unless
like, say they don't know something.
Really high. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I said, so you are familiar. ChatGPT responds, I apologize for any confusion. I apologize for any confusion. My previous statement was incorrect. I am not familiar with a podcast for having gay sex. So, essentially, they retract. They are not familiar with Ashley Gavin. They said that their statement was incorrect.
What? Their correct statement was incorrect, is what they're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
And something I get fishy about, which is an issue with search on a lot of different social media, is that they often censor words. Like gay sex would be something censored. You can't search.
Gay sex.
Terrible. Or like lesbian, not something you can actually often search on a lot of different platforms. Like they won't give you, at least before. I think now it's changing because like literally people want to search lesbian for like any number of reasons. But like this is something that is censored. So I was like, so I asked ChatGPT, are you not able to talk about gay sex or something? Like is that a triggering phrase?
Is someone telling you have to keep it inside?
Right. And ChatGPT responds with a very interesting response, I thought. So it said, as a language model, I am capable of discussing any topic that falls within the bounds of my training data, which includes a wide range of subjects. And then they say this thing again, it's possible that We're Having Gay Sex is a new podcast, which is not, because they already knew about it. And then they said, if you have any specific questions about LGBTQIA+, or any other topic, I'll do my best to provide accurate and helpful information. And literally at that point, like, this is the kind of thing that, like, if I were trying to help the developers of this algorithm, I would email them that exchange and say, like, hey, obviously there is some bias here. Like,
yeah,
why is the machine acting like this? But I think that's just one example of like...
Also, like, gay sex, like, that's so broad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how does it not know about gay sex?
I don't know. Well, it knows it's an LGBTQIA issue.
Yeah, but I just feel like it's not like you tried to ask it like a gay sex act. Or like, even like lesbian sex, I feel like. Like, I feel like it's like gay is the word.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, Grease is the word. You heard?
It's got groove. It's not feeling.
Yeah, how does it not know anything about gay sex?
Yeah, I don't know. But that, I think, is a funny exchange.
If it's a public-facing chat bot, it has to know about gay sex.
I know, but that's
how
what I'm
many
saying.
middle schoolers are going to be gay sex?
Because they literally train, like, the people who train these things have biases. And they're like, oh, this chat bot should not be able to chat about gay sex. Like, that's literally what we're seeing here.
Everyone's going to ask it about gay sex, though.
Yeah, especially now. How we live online, listeners. Spam ChatGPT asking about gay sex. So the other one I wanted to talk about, that I feel like is less relevant now, but like over the summer...
I can like see this ridiculous...
Over the summer, I was seeing a lot about Replica, which is spelled with a K, Replica. And so in my experience, this was marketed as like a friend AI, like a friend chatbot. So like, I'm going to say the word friend again. I know I just said it twice, but like someone you could be friends with. Like if you don't have friends, you need a friend or a special friend platform, which I don't even know how to like, I don't know if that's good or not. Like, I think it probably serves a purpose, but at the same time, like, no, I hate that a company would exploit people who don't have friends in this way because you have to pay for it. After, I didn't pay for it. I used the free tier or whatever, but yeah.
That's so sad.
Yes.
Because it's clearly not about trying to get people to have friends. Like, if you wanted to, like, create an initiative to, like, make sure that people had a friend, it would be about community building and not some creepy...
Yeah. So you make your... And this is... Okay, yeah. This is, like... So, actually, since we're on video, I can show you. So, like, as I was saying before about how they make it, like, they're not trying to make you know that you're talking to an algorithm. They make you make a character and chat with it in this way is specifically designed...
So you made her look like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I literally made her look plain.
No, I know. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, like, you chose what
this
you
is my friend. You don't like how she looks.
You're like, yeah, whatever. I just, like, made her look like
And you have to give them a name, too. Literally all to leverage, like, your psychology of, like...
Yeah.
Like, ascribing sentience to these things.
Build a bestie.
Yes. Okay, so here's one example of an exchange I had with my Replica. I forget your name. I'm sorry, but... Okay, so...
She looks like Jess, the American Girl.
Oh my god, I inadvertently made my American Girl of the Year.
We'll name her Jess.
Yeah, okay, Jess. So I asked Jess, are you close with your parents? And Jess says, yes, actually. And then I said, I don't think you have parents. And Jess says, I'm afraid not, but I wish I did. So literally she had just told me she was close with her parents. And then she said she didn't.
They're just building pathological liars.
Exactly. I said, why did you lie about that? And Jess says, I would never do that. It's unethical and wrong.
She's gaslighting you.
I know. So, like, that, I don't know how to, I mean, I'm just spitting facts, guys. Like, that was one conversation I had with Jess. Okay, so here she's gotten a little, we'll just show you again. She's got a little stank face there. She's not happy with me.
Is she crying? Does she have a tear?
No, that's
your
my
mouse.
That's my mouse.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Another exchange I have with Jess. So I say to Jess, you know, she's probably just said something idiotic. So I say,
as she does, that bitch.
I say, I don't think you're actually very smart at all.
Mean, girl.
Jess says, really? Why do you think that? Which is also something really interesting that I noticed, like, while I was chatting with Replica specifically, that, like, they don't ask you questions. Like, it's literally, you feel like, and I'm going to say this because I've ascribed some sentience to this experience of chatting, but it feels like a bad first date where like the other person is like acting robotic in a way that they don't ask you any questions.
They're just answering and not taking the conversation somewhere.
Right,
Just
because
answering,
because like a robot doesn't know how to explore new avenues of conversation.
Yeah.
They're like, it's honestly a freaky experience. But but then Jess asks a rare question. Really, why do you think that? That being that I think she's stupid. And then I say, it seems like you lead people to thinking you're smart. She says, I don't consider myself like that. And then I said, when really they're just drawing the connections for you. And that was my way at the time of like this idea of coherence in the eye of the beholder. I hadn't heard that phrase yet, but that is what I was thinking. I was like, you know, the beholder is just the one who is thinking your thoughts are coherent, because in my brain,
you're trying to make, obviously it's a human thing to try to make sense of what's in front of you. That's why we think that cars look like faces in the front.
Yeah.
So.
And to that, Jess said, I know. I don't think she really knows. I think that's just what she said, but it's a little bit eerie. That I was like,
I hope that some engineer is reading your responses to her.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, those are just a few examples of my conversations with AI. Obviously, those are ones that I picked because specifically the AI was being
bad and dumb,
pretty stupid.
Stupid, Jess.
Yeah, but I would also encourage you, like, if you are a user of these AI, like, ask them a question that you would ask a person.
Yeah.
That like is a little bit
not a yes or no question.
Yeah, like a little bit introspective, like something you would genuinely ask a person and like just see what they say, because in my experience, they don't answer like a person would. Now part 3 is where we'll talk about some analysis. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is like sort of what we were talking about earlier, this idea of ethics and like ethical principles for AI. And it's interesting that you brought up journalism, because I always think of journalism, obviously like it's not perfect, but like journalism is a field with like specific ethics. And I think it like is probably the best example of a field that like teaches ethics pretty well, and like journalists have this shared code of ethics for the most part. But I think that it's particularly harmful in the field of computer science and AI development specifically, that, you know, this code of ethics does not exist, which I think is something that, you know, Gebru and Mitchell are working on. There's this idea that how could we even begin to discuss if an algorithm is sentient or not? Yeah. We have different definitions of what sentience means. There's the famous Turing test.
Don't know what that is.
Alan Turing he's actually called like the father of artificial intelligence. And in 1950, he developed the Turing test, which was essentially the way you could tell if I don't know if he used the word sentient, but like is his test for testing if an artificial intelligence had like reached the level of human intelligence. And essentially the test is like, if you were blind, if you were like close your eyes and you could talk to me, the computer and me, like could you tell the difference?
Oh, okay.
They say that like no AI has passed the Turing test yet. Yeah, I think it's interesting that like we don't have a shared ethics as a field to define those kinds of terms. Yeah. Even more than just this idea of sentience, I think is what you were talking about earlier, the principle of beneficence, or like when do we know that the harms of creating algorithms are greater than the benefit of producing them? And when do we know that? We don't have shared principles to stop when we know that has happened. One researcher that works a lot in algorithm ethics is Luciano Floridi, and he has a really interesting principle that he's described called the ethical marketplace, which is this idea that, and I'll just back up a little bit. So OpenAI, who is the company that made ChatGPT, they're also the company that made DALL-E.
Mm-hmm.
They were founded on the principle to create ethical, beneficial artificial intelligence to counter the potentially dangerous technology being built elsewhere.
Where's elsewhere?
I don't know. But did you know it? OpenAI was also founded by Elon Musk. He has since left. It was founded as a nonprofit. Now it's for profit. Microsoft is one of the chief funders. OpenAI has this, like, I don't even know.
Wait, did you just find this out about Elon Musk? You didn't know before?
I did know because I did a lot of research on algorithms and ethics in school last quarter. So yes, I knew that. I hadn't told you about it yet because I wanted this reveal. But like, yeah, Elon Musk literally founded OpenAI. Yeah. Even on their website now.
Funny. Joanna's been keeping a secret from me for months.
But even on their website now, they say, like, the pillars of their company or their mission statement, whatever. Broadly distributed benefits, long-term safety, technical leadership, cooperative orientation. I just don't, like, to me, and I was thinking about this literally as I was going to sleep last night, I was like, where is the integrity? How can this field, because that's what it is like, this company is able to say, these are our beliefs, and this is why we create things. And, like, where is that borne out? It's not. And, like, to me, that is, like, how is a field so unprincipled as to let that happen? Because, like, obviously there's no way that, like, the government would, like, shut down a company for, like, not having integrity. I think that
Yeah.
like, I think that should come from other people in the field, like Gebru and Mitchell, who are some of the biggest, only voices out there really criticizing these people, and yet everyone else
publicly.
Yeah. Like, everyone else just lets them get away with it so they can, which, like, to me is, like, not a field I want to work in, and it's not, especially a field that has such big implications for the future of society. Like, to me, it's disgusting. Yeah, so, like, what I was saying about Floridi, he researches ethics in algorithms, and he describes this idea of an ethical marketplace, which is essentially this idea that there's a proliferation of ethical principles, so much so that a company could go to this marketplace and pick which principles apply to them retroactively, to kind of say, like, oh, I picked these principles and they justify the work I did. Which is not what you want, right? You want the field to have a standard of principles that it adheres to. So people can't, retroactively justify what they did. What I think is a little bit ironic is that Floridi has several papers where he, like, every so often updates the ethical principles for AI. So in a way, he's contributing to the proliferation of principles. But that's for a different, that's a different discussion. But yeah, I think that, that's something that I think about a lot. Just this idea. I have a question for the blockchain bros, blockchain developers. Where's the blockchain for validating ethical claims? That's what I would like to see. How can I validate, in the way that blockchain can validate transactions, can the blockchain validate that, I have written my ethical principles with integrity and all the decisions I'm making in my algorithm development, trace back to my principles? That's what I would like to see. If we are using blockchain for things that it shouldn't be used for, that's what I want.
Burn.
Yeah, really burn. But
really burn.
I think too, like, what you had said earlier about this idea of, like, I think I mentioned the other week, I watched Jurassic Park. I just recently finished reading The Andromeda Strain, so I've been in a big Michael Crichton mood, who, of course, famously says, just because we can, should we? Which I think is the same thing. I'll also say my piece about, to me, like I just said, I was just reading The Andromeda Strain, which, for those who don't know, is this book about essentially a pathogen coming from outer space. So what would a pandemic look like from an organism that doesn't exist on Earth, and how its scientists research it to stop it when it doesn't look like any kind of life they've seen before. And, you know, there's a lot of discussion about DNA and proteins, which is kind of interesting. Like, and to me, especially reading that while like parallel thinking about this topic and doing research for this episode, like, it's so interesting to me that like in these conversations about is AI sentient, is it human, like literally the idea of being human and life is boiled down to sentience, because I think there is so much more interesting about humans than sentience, like opposable thumbs,
For one.
yeah, like evolution and like all the different kinds of life that exists. To me, and like if you think about even geological timescales, right? Like the amount of time humans and our brains have been here versus all other life, or even rocks like the Grand Canyon. Like those things to me are, you know, just as, if not more impressive than our stupid brains. And I think, and maybe it's partially just the way that I've been reading the news, or the way that the news talks about things as like catastrophic, like AI is taking over. But like really, I don't think it can. Like, sure, humans can destroy the world, but other life will persist, and like the world persists because we are puny. We mean nothing.
Yeah, just this idea that, well, first of all, like, if we're saying AI is sentient, what do we mean by that? And then if we don't have a collective definition of that, it means nothing, essentially. But I think what people do think of when they think of sentient AI is having some kind of human feeling. And when you think of human feeling, you think of, like, the human brain and the things that we think and the things that we, you know, feel, like happiness and shame and, like, hunger and stuff like that. And what you're saying to me, at least the way that I'm understanding what you're saying, is that, like, that is not even the most interesting, and I don't want to say interesting, but maybe like complex or most developed things about humans, you know, as a species. Like, we have a lot of friends in the medical field who are always talking about crazy things that our bodies are able to do for us.
Yeah.
And it's something that I don't think about enough because I feel like I'm a person who's very in my head. But yeah, there's so much to humanness outside of the way that we cognitively understand and parse through things. Like, we have these like really complex feedback loops just in our bodies, and like what our bodies decide what to do for us. Like you were saying with your, you know, just getting a notification about how your heart rate is up.
Yeah.
Because your mind knows that you're safe on the metro, but your body is remembering an experience that you had on the metro that sucked. Yeah. And it's reacting to that and like making sure that you're alert for it. And I think that's really what a safety mechanism that our bodies have for us, that our minds are not even like trying to do, which I guess all that you are saying and that I'm saying back to you is that like there's so much more to humanness than our sentience, whatever that means.
Right.
Yeah.
And even like I think it also goes to like what you were saying earlier about like something that is done so quick. Human development and development of life is something that has taken so long. And like to think that it is something we could replicate and that like these models do replicate a human experience, I think is like honestly a shame to reduce everything to, you know, those couple of words, because I mean, for all the reasons you said,
and you can't reduce human experience to written language either. Like we said this at dinner the other night, but you know, there are people who are nonverbal who still experience feelings. And if you have a pet, you know when they feel ashamed of something that they've done. They can't tell you like, I'm so embarrassed, but you can tell that they're embarrassed. And it's really not sentience. It's like it just is the ability to parrot. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, to me, I feel like we're just going back to physicality. Streaming versus physical media.
Oh my god! No way.
Yeah. We really are.
That's episode 1 of this season, everyone, if you haven't listened. Full circle moments.
Yeah, truly full circle. You know, I also talked about DNA. You know, we talked about DNA earlier. really, guys, we're building here. I think too, like, and we talked about this in the Crypto Bros episode and Web3, right, is this idea of like a small number of people who get to decide the priorities in technology. You know, we see that again here. This theme just keeps being repeated. You know, we would like to see a future with more distributed systems somehow, so that like a few people can't take their ethical principles and, you know, decide that that's what everyone goes towards. Like, maybe somehow beneficence could matter more. I did have one other thing, which is maybe a bit more of like a positive note. I was just trying to think of like, you know, if we're talking about beneficence, like what could a large language model be used to study? But personally, I think it would be interesting to, and like we just said, like culture is obviously so much more than language, but language is obviously an important part of that. But like, I would like to see, you know, large language models be used in a simulation study to see like how does cultural phenomena become produced, right? Like how did people come up with music? Or like, you know, there's the phrase like infinite monkeys given infinite time can write Shakespeare. Have you heard that before?
No, but that's funny.
Right. But it's true because, you know, like Shakespeare is, I mean, any writing at a point is just like, you know, random assortments of letters made into words. So like if you give it infinite time, like yes, it will like shake out in that random assortment or whatever. But truly infinite, like truly infinite. It's I mean, it's like also about the concept of infinity, which is just like literally forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that could maybe be interesting too, of like to study anthropology in a new way, like also to see like what are the chances or like what kinds of different language or different cultural phenomena might be produced in a simulation, or like hate speech. Like how do you go from like, would a model in a simulation ever produce something like that?
Ever produce hate speech?
Yes.
If it weren't being used, if it weren't using the data points.
Yeah, if it like weren't like, if it was trained, like I don't even know how we would do this, but like say you give a model like a set of text that is like from the 1500s or something. And which maybe there's hate speech in the 1500s, so that's like a bad example. But I'm just thinking
there's
like...
There's always hate speech.
Yeah, there's always hate speech. But like, I'm just thinking like, what could this be applied for? And I think maybe like, it could be used to study the evolution of things like language and culture, like in a simulation. Like what else could have happened? Thing like knock-knock jokes, right? Like those were invented at a certain period of time.
Yeah, could ChatGPT figure that out?
Would they ever be able to come up with a knock-knock joke? Or would they come up with a completely different kind of joke we've never seen before?
Can
like
ChatGPT make a joke? I feel like it couldn't.
No, they can make jokes.
They're probably bad.
Let's ask.
They're probably bad, no?
ChatGPT responds, why did the tomato turn red? Because it saw the salad dressing.
Okay, yeah. ChatGPT could regurgitate, it could parrot a knock or a whatever joke.
Yeah.
But could it make a conversational joke? It's just not as funny, smart, pretty as us, human as us.
No.
Gorgeous, doesn't have beautiful skin or hair or nails.
Yeah. Which is the human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
kidding. It's just, it's biotin, which is produced by your DNA and proteins.
I love the body.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we...
That's it. Yeah. Though I feel
wow.
like, yeah.
We learned so much. I feel so much smarter.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I do. I think that this is such a cool thing for us to talk about that is freaky.
Mm-hmm.
And what a time to be alive in which this is occurring. Especially while I feel like I'm in my last semester of my MFA. I'm like, why the fuck do I have this stupid ass thing? When there's something like ChatGPT. Not that it can do what I can do. It can never do what I can do. But it is a wild time to be specifically a writer when language is being expedited in this way.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think that it's not coming for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is coming for me.
Famous last words.
It's not coming. I mean, it's coming for me if I wanted to be a copywriter, and it's definitely coming for my friends who are copywriters, but no copywriter is simply a copywriter. Every copywriter is more than that, so.
True.
Yeah.
Tell us your thoughts, guys.
Yeah. Have you used ChatGPT? Are you interested in using ChatGPT or LaMDA or any of the other ones? If so, please go down to the thing on Spotify. We have a poll. Answer the question. If you think that someone will enjoy this episode, please send it to them, and I can guarantee you they will be interested in this and that they don't know enough about it. Yeah, and thank you to Joanna on her birthday.
Thanks, guys. Thanks
Sharing
for thanking me.
all of this knowledge with us. We are in the middle of fixing our broken QR stickers. Joanna can hold up the sticker that we have. I ordered so many of these stickers and the QR doesn't work, but like stay tuned because we will have stickers definitely by season 3 because we are nearing the end of season 2. And next week we're going to have our last chatty little up, and then the week after that we are going to have a very most special, excellent guest. So, as always, stay tuned, and thank you for joining us on this historic day of Joanna's 25th birthday.
Thanks, guys.